Bienvenido a Historias en la Penumbra. En este territorio de medias luces, donde la claridad apenas alcanza, las historias más terroríficas surgen lentamente desde la oscuridad. Aquí, los susurros del miedo narran relatos capaces de congelar tu sangre y acelerar tu pulso hasta el límite. Cada narración te conducirá a un laberinto oscuro, plagado de secretos macabros y terrores insondables. Prepárate para adentrarte en un mundo donde la realidad se difumina y el miedo es la única certeza que queda. The security feed from last Tuesday night held an impossibility shimmering in its monochromatic grain. 20 viewings haven't steadied the tremor in my hands. It possesses the silhouette of a man, yet lacks substance entirely, a phantasmal contour drifting through the tightly packed tables of my establishment. The gilded shillelagh, ethereal as conjured vapor. Through its form, the garish glow of neon beer signs pulsed, undisturbed. Perhaps clarity demands I rewind 3 weeks, to the genesis of the strangeness. 6 years I've poured my life into this pub, inheriting its worn soul from my uncle when Florida beckoned him. The gilded shillelagh isn't grand, merely an anchor in its South Boston neighborhood. All shadowed timber, tarnished brass gleaming dully, and that persistent, subterranean perfume of spilled ale that defies all scrubbing. I am intimate with every groan of its floorboards, every battle scar on the mahogany bar, every soul who seeks refuge within its walls. The Harp Lager tap was the harbinger. A lethargic Monday afternoon, deep in the drudgery of inventory, and it erupted, not a hesitant drip, but a full-throated gush, golden liquid cascading wastefully into the drain pan. I dismantled the handle, probed the mechanism for some logical fault, found none. The instant my fingers brushed the cool metal, the flow ceased. Old plumbing, I reasoned, scribbling a note for servicing the draft lines. Yet it recurred 2 days later, and again the following week. Always the harp, always unattended. The technician pronounced the system sound. Next, the jukebox developed a peculiar sentience. It's a modern digital contraption tethered to the ether. Mid-song, familiar melodies would fray, unraveling not into static, but something akin to susurrations weaving through the notes, syllables just beyond comprehension. Once, as the chairs were being stacked for closing, it summoned the parting glass, that mournful Irish dirge, unbidden. The machine's digital memory showed no trace of the selection. Oive Kelly, my steadfast bartender of 3 years, tendered her notice after a whiskey tumbler launched itself from the back bar, exploding against the brick mere inches from her temple. Not one prone to hysterics, a wife swore she'd felt a presence glide past. A brush of profound cold, the instant before the glass took flight. Liam Casey, hired in her stead, endured 4 shifts. He fled, unnerved by phantom whispers calling his name from the depths of the storeroom when the bar stood empty, save for him. The crescendo arrived when every bottle arrayed on the top shelf commenced a violent, percussive rattling, a localized tremor shaking nothing else in the room. I began lingering after lockup, immersing myself in the shillelagh's nocturnal persona. Emptiness amplifies every utterance. The ice machine's rhythmic sighs mimic respiration. The neon signs bleed chromatic specters that writhe just outside direct sight. Last Tuesday, compelled, I began scrutinizing the security recordings from the preceding weeks. 4 electronic eyes keep watch. Behind the bar, across the main floor, guarding the entrance and penetrating the storeroom gloom. Methodically, I sifted through hours of footage. Initially, only the known anomalies surfaced: the rogue tap, the projectile glass, the quivering bottles. But then, a subtle distortion snagged my attention, lurking in the periphery of numerous clips, an effect like heat shimmering off summer asphalt, yet possessed of deliberate motion. It coiled between tables, seemed to pause near patrons. One segment showed it hovering beside a man nursing his pint for nearly 10 minutes. The man repeatedly chafed his arms, despite the comfortable 75 degrees within the bar. The recording from 3 a.m. last Tuesday, however, fractured my composure. The shillelagh was shuttered, bathed only in the emergency glow of exit signs and the faint aura of brewery logos. Night vision rendered the scene in stark gradations of gray. Poised to fast forward, I froze. A human form, translucent yet undeniably present, navigated the main room. It seemed to float, suspended an inch above the worn floorboards. Its outlines blurred, indistinct, but the fundamental architecture was there. Head, shoulders, limbs. It paused at the bar, appeared to settle onto a stool. For 20 minutes it remained, a spectral patron in the void. Then, its head pivoted towards the camera. I could have sworn I saw eyes. Again and again, I replayed that segment. No artifact of light, no glitch in the lens could account for it. Corroboration came from the other cameras, capturing the entity from variant angles. Whatever this is, its existence is undeniable. The subsequent night, I augmented my surveillance, deploying additional cameras, positioning digital voice recorders throughout the silent bar. I confided in no one. The label of madness is easily affixed, though perhaps madness would be a mercy. The new evidence revealed intensified activity. The figure materialized once more, this time venturing behind the bar itself. It mimed the actions of pouring drafts, mixing concoctions, its incorporeal hands facing through the solid objects it sought to manipulate. One recorder captured a faint humming, an old, melancholic air, the parting glass. My inquiries turned to the building's lineage. Municipal archives confirmed the site had housed a public house since 1947, albeit under various banners. 3 souls had expired within these walls, 2 claimed by heart failure, another by an ill-fated encounter with a chicken wing in '82. None matched the description of my spectral visitor. I probed the memories of the elder regulars. Most offered dismissive chuckles, but Seamus O'Connell, whose patronage stretched back to the '60s, grew somber at my tentative questions. He recounted his father's tales of an early bartender, one Patrick "Paddy" Corrigan. Corrigan, the story went, resided in the flat above, his devotion to the bar absolute. Unmarried, rarely absent, he lived and breathed the establishment. One morning in 1956, he was discovered deceased behind the bar he cherished. A heart attack, they said. He was merely 42. In the Boston Herald's dusty archives, I unearthed a photograph from 1955. There stood Paddy Corrigan behind this very bar, tall, lean, dark-haired. The print was coarse, yet something in his stance, the specific angle of his posture, it resonated chillingly with the figure haunting my security feeds. The phenomena have escalated. Last night witnessed every bottle in the speed rail simultaneously disgorge its contents, liquor atomizing in the air. For a solid hour, the jukebox cycled exclusively through traditional Irish reels and laments, ignoring all patron selections. The temperature behind the bar plummeted, my breath pluming visibly in the sudden frost. I document this, needing to chart a course. Selling the gilded shillelagh, severing ties, is an option. Yet, a conviction whispers that Corrigan would disapprove. This place was his entire world. Evidently, death hasn't altered that bond. Perhaps his intent isn't to terrorize, but merely to persist in the vocation he loved. Tonight, I intend an experiment. Post-closing, I'll pour a measure of Power's gold label. Seamus mentioned it was Paddy's preferred tipple. And simply speak. Address the emptiness. Acknowledge his dedication. But explain the disruption, the fear sown among staff and clientele. Propose a truce. Cameras will roll. My phone will record. Should anything transpire, there will be evidence, at least, that my sanity remains intact. Update, 3:47 a.m. I proceeded, poured the shot, commenced my monologue, feeling profoundly foolish initially. 20 minutes yielded only silence. Then, the familiar, unnerving chill descended. The shot glass glided smoothly across the polished bar top, untouched, before tipping over, drained. The jukebox flickered to life. The parting glass, spilling into the quiet, this time pristine, devoid of distortion. The security footage reveals Corrigan's form manifesting beside me at the bar, sharper than ever before. He raised a spectral glass of his own in a silent toast, an act invisible to my naked eye, discernible only later on screen. Yet, I felt it. A cold, feather-light pressure on my shoulder, eliciting a cascade of tingles down my spine. Since that exchange, a measure of peace has settled over the gilded shillelagh. The taps behave. The jukebox respects selections. Occasionally, in the liminal hours of early morning, a flicker in my peripheral vision suggests a tall, slender shape, moving with purpose behind the bar. The feeling, however, is no longer menacing. It's watchful, almost proprietary. I've hired new personnel. Honesty felt paramount. I briefed them on our resident spirit. Reactions vary from skepticism to cautious belief, the latter often solidifying after a few late-night shifts. Crucially, no one has quit. Corrigan, it seems, has adapted to coexistence. He still performs his spectral rounds after closing, an unseen inspection of locks and taps. A glass might shift inexplicably by inches. An old Irish tune might momentarily usurp the playlist, but the overt disturbances have ceased. Last week I framed the 1955 photograph, assigning it a place of honor behind the bar. The regulars find amusement in the tale, particularly when I mention Paddy's continued presence, ensuring standards are maintained. Some have taken to leaving a parting shot for him on the bar. I've attuned myself to his subtle signs, the ghost of a footfall on quiet nights, the faint humming carried on the air, the soft clinking of glasses being meticulously aligned when the bar stands empty. His presence has woven itself into the fabric of the place, as intrinsic as the floorboard's complaints and the neon's steady hum. This afternoon, engaged in inventory, much like that first Monday when the harp tap acted out, I felt the familiar cold spot drift past. And then, unmistakably, a whisper, barely louder than thought, running low on the powers. A quick check confirmed the assessment. Every establishment needs diligent management, I suppose. Some managers just possess more permanence than others. The cameras continue their silent vigil. Sometimes I review the tapes, observing our spectral bartender on his rounds. He moves with quiet intent, surveying tables, adjusting unseen chairs, standing sentinel over the domain he cherished too fiercely in life to relinquish in death. Explanations feel superfluous now. Some truths simply are. Sometimes, all that's required at closing is to pour two measures, one for yourself and one for the bartender who never truly punched out. They say pubs acquire personalities, absorbing the echoes of laughter and sorrow, triumphs and regrets seeped into their very timbers. The gilded shillelagh possesses more character than most, and as long as Paddy Corrigan wishes to remain on the payroll, I'm content to have him. Just don't request a cosmopolitan. Death hasn't diminished his professional standards. The apartment beckoned with its trifecta of virtues: affordability, a pulse point location, and the promise of tranquility whispered by its sturdy brick facade. Perched directly above a boulangerie, its days were perfumed with the yeast-laden breath of baking bread, a scent evoking sun-drenched, languid weekends. Mornings arrived on this warm, crusty tide, drifting through the open casement of my galley kitchen. For a handful of initial days, existence felt charmed, bordering on idyllic. Precisely at 10 each evening, the bakery below would extinguish its lights, plunging the narrow street into a profound hush. No rumble of traffic, no boisterous neighbors, no rattling late-night deliveries. I believed with burgeoning certainty that I'd unearthed a rare urban sanctuary. Then came the first night, and with it, a sound. Faint, almost subliminal, it materialized as I lay in bed, my bedroom adjacent to the short corridor bridging the space to my living area. Through this passage, the noise floated, ethereal and distant, easily mistaken for the building's settling bones. It possessed a peculiar quality, the delicate chime of metal gracing porcelain, akin to a fork's gentle caress against a plate, yet so muted it barely registered against the quiet. A commonplace apartment murmur, perhaps. I let it dissolve into the background of my thoughts. The following day unfolded in the prosaic rhythm of settling in. Cardboard monoliths yielded their contents. The sofa found its anchor. The television flickered to life. Normalcy asserted itself. Below, the boulangerie hummed, its ovens exhaling fragrant bursts that wreathed my rooms. Venturing down, I procured a rustic loaf and strong coffee, exchanging pleasantries with the proprietor, Monsieur Dubois, a man whose smile seemed genuine as he welcomed his new upstairs tenant. That evening, post-10, the bakery lights winked out. I watched Dubois secure the heavy door. By midnight, stillness reigned, until, near the witching hour of 2, it returned. This time, I stood in the kitchen's dimness, glass of water in hand. The sound, undeniably clearer now, seemed to emanate from the very floor beneath my feet, or perhaps coalesce in the air around me. Utensils, dishes, a distinct, unhurried cadence. I strained to discern if it bled through the shared wall, but my neighbors, early sleepers both, were reliably silent behind the thick plaster. This noise was specific, methodical, the scrape of a fork, a pregnant pause, the faint rasp of a knife. It persisted, a slow, deliberate rhythm, like someone savoring a solitary meal. Motionless beside the counter, I listened, attention coiling in my arms, the fine hairs on my nape prickling. Something felt intrinsically wrong. No one should occupy the bakery kitchen at this hour. The staff, I'd observed, departed well before 11. Sleep became elusive, my mind replaying that soft, insistent clinking. Though rationality balked at specters, logic offered no comfortable harbor. Mornin saw me downstairs again, ostensibly for coffee. "Anyone stay late last night, Monsieur Dubois?" I inquired, striving for nonchalance. He frowned, a slight furrow creasing his brow. "Absolutely not. My staff leaves promptly. The kitchen is secured." I forced a nod, deciding to shelve the anomaly. Old buildings sigh, pipes conspire in percussive rattles. Sounds echo strangely through aged structures. I resolved not to dwell. Yet, the pattern cemented itself over the ensuing week. 10 o'clock, the bakery falls silent. 2 or 3 in the morning, the muted symphony resumes. Silverware on china, never loud, but unnervingly distinct. One night, driven by a creeping unease, I pressed my ear to my apartment door. The communal hallway breathed only silence. I migrated to the living room window, overlooking the bakery's flat roof. Nothing stirred. Sock-footed, I padded through my rooms, a diviner seeking an auditory source. But the sound remained stubbornly omnipresent and elusive. It seemed to vibrate up through the floorboards, yet simultaneously hang suspended in the air. With each recurrence, my heart hammered a frantic tempo against my ribs, a peculiar chill settling deep in my gut, the visceral recognition of something profoundly amiss. One night, resolve hardening, I descended the stairs near 2:30. Keys clutched tight, shod feet tentative on the worn treads, my own breathing amplified in the tomb-like quiet of the stairwell. My legs felt strangely insubstantial. Reaching the ground floor, I peered through the bakery door's small glass panel. Utter darkness lay within. No hum of machinery, no residual oven glow, no flicker of movement. The comforting bread scent had long dissipated, leaving only stale air. Releasing a pent-up breath, I tested the door, firmly locked. For a minute, I stood sentinel, listening intently. Nothing. Then, just as I turned, pivoting back towards the ascent, the faintest clink reached me. A fork, unmistakably, against a plate, seeming to originate from the bakery's deepest recesses. Not loud, barely a whisper, yet enough to root me to the spot. My chest constricted. My fingers, gripping the banister, trembled. Whipping back, I pressed my ear flat against the cold glass. Silence, only the frantic thudding of my own pulse in my ears. Defeated, I retreated upstairs. There was nothing more to be done. The next morning, I broached the subject with Monsieur Dubois again. "I'm hearing noises at night," I stated, abandoning subtlety. He regarded me with patient skepticism. "Perhaps a dream, Elias, or your neighbors." "No," I insisted. "I know what I heard." He shook his head, his expression unchanging. "Impossible. No one is in there after hours. The security system is armed every night." His certainty was a wall. I ceased asking, wary of the paranoid tenant label. Night after night, the ritual persisted. The sound, lasting 5, perhaps 10 minutes. I'd lie rigid in bed, muscles clenched beneath the covers. Earplugs proved porous armor against the insidious clink-clink. One desperate night, I switched on the television, hoping ambient dialogue might drown it out. But the tapping persisted, an unnerving counterpoint beneath the show's soundtrack. My jaw ached from unconscious clenching. I woke to a throbbing headache. This had to be confronted. One evening, before closing, I cornered Finn, one of the younger bakers. "Ever hear anything strange here late at night?" He gave me a blank look. "Once I clock out, I'm gone till morning." He shrugged. "Maybe talk to Mr. Henderson." The landlord, his office, a cramped unit on the ground floor, was often empty. I left a note detailing the nocturnal disturbances. It went unanswered. That night demanded a more methodical vigil. Lights extinguished save for a single lamp casting long shadows in the living room. Television silenced, I sat on the sofa, notepad poised. At 1:55 a.m. precisely, it began. The gentle percussion of tableware. The familiar pattern unfolded. Scrape, pause, scrape. Then a quick succession of 2 or 3 taps. It resonated directly below, seemingly just beneath my floorboards. My pulse surged, palms slick with sweat, a sudden coldness gripping my arms. I remained utterly still, listening. 5 minutes stretched, filled with the phantom sounds of someone consuming a meal in painstaking slow motion. Was that a faint swallow? A quiet exhalation? Uncertainty prickled. The hairs on my forearm bristled. I scribbled the time. 1:55, 2:03 a.m. Then, abrupt silence. Rising stealthily, I eased open my door and stepped into the dusty-smelling hallway. The building's old walls seemed to absorb the sound of my bare feet. Towards the stairwell, I crept, floorboards groaning a soft protest. My throat felt parched. Leaning over the railing at the top of the stairs, I peered into the Stygian darkness below. Waiting. Nothing. My heart pounded violently, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. As I turned, retreating towards my door, the clattering resumed. Brief, sharp, impossibly seeming to emanate from the direction of my own apartment. I froze, a wave of cold washing down my spine. It lasted mere seconds, then ceased. Shaking, I stumbled back inside, double-locking the door. My knees threatened to buckle. I sank onto the sofa, staring numbly at the floor. Daylight brought attempts at rationalization. Peculiar acoustics, old pipes singing an unusual song. But I knew the gurgle and clank of plumbing. This was different, possessing the distinct, undeniable timbre of cutlery striking ceramic. The thought of confiding in someone surfaced, but I was adrift in this new city, friendships unformed. And the sheer absurdity, inviting someone for a nocturnal stakeout to witness phantom dinner sounds, felt deeply embarrassing. Sleep became a fractured commodity. I woke groggy, appetite dulled, nerves frayed thin. Each night became a tense vigil, my stomach knotting as midnight approached. White noise generators hummed futilely, the subtle clink sliced through. One night, near 3, frustration boiled over. Pulling on sweats, flashlight in hand, I descended once more to the bakery entrance. Maybe a glimpse of movement, a sliver of light. The door remained steadfastly locked. My flashlight beam swept the interior. Empty racks, gleaming tables, every pan stowed. Stillness absolute. And yet, in the echo chamber of my own mind, or perhaps truly in the air, I perceived the ghostly resonance of that fork tapping porcelain. A familiar tightness seized my chest. I fled back up the stairs, breath catching, heartbeat deafening, forehead burning. I queried Ben, my neighbor across the hall. Night noises? He was adamant. Out like a light by 10. Walls are solid as rock, never hear a peep. I tried Mrs. Gable upstairs, an elderly woman of rigid habits. Do you ever eat late? She bristled slightly. Young man, I haven't left my bed after 8 o'clock in 20 years. That left the bakery, its staff sworn to absence, its owner insistent on security. Weeks bled into a month, the routine immutable. The sound might commence at 2, or shift closer to 3, but its duration and character, that slow, deliberate dining, remained constant. I attempted resignation, donned headphones blasting music, yet my body anticipated the sound. tensing involuntarily. My hands developed a slight tremor when washing dishes. The knot in my stomach became a permanent resident whenever the clock crept past midnight. The feeling of being privy to something clandestine, something not meant to be heard, burrowed under my skin. One evening, Matteo, a colleague, came over after our shift. Sharing pizza, I hesitantly recounted the nightly occurrences. Skepticism radiated from him. As he prepared to leave around 1:45 a.m., I implored him to stay. "Just wait. Please, I need someone else to hear it." We sat in charged silence. At 2 a.m. sharp, it began. Matteo froze mid-breath. I saw his eyes widen in the dim light. "That," he whispered, voice tight, "is definitely metal on ceramic." He rose, tiptoed to the window, peered out. Nothing. Our eyes met across the room, a silent acknowledgement of the inexplicable. After a few minutes, the sound ceased. He let out a long, slow breath. "Elias," he said, his voice strained. "That's deeply weird." He departed soon after, casting uneasy glances back towards my floor. At least the haunting wasn't solely mine. The source remains a phantom. I exhausted every avenue. I pressed Mr. Henderson again about ventilation quirks or aging appliances. He offered a dismissive shrug, claiming all was normal. A plumber, summoned on my own dime, found no anomalies in the pipework. The landlord flatly refused further investigation costs. Monsieur Dubois and his staff remained unwavering in their denials of any after-hours activity. Sometimes, hearing the sound now, my throat tightens. My scalp tingles. I conjure an image, someone seated at a table in the pitch-black bakery below, methodically consuming a meal in the dead of night. The thought makes my skin crawl. I no longer venture downstairs in the wee hours. The fear is too potent. Early bedtimes prove futile. I simply wake at 2, alerted by those soft taps and scrapes. Staying up late, hoping exhaustion would grant oblivion, fails equally. The noise reliably pierces my fatigue. Each morning, the sun climbs, and the warm, wholesome scent of baking bread drifts anew into my kitchen. The boulangerie stirs to life at 6, drawing neighbors for fresh croissants. By then, I'm adrift in a liminal state between waking and sleep. Daylight dilutes the nocturnal tension, but never fully dispels its residue, a lingering tightness in my chest. A persistent question echoes. What unseen currents flow through this old building? Moving out feels like the only sane solution. Yet circumstances tether me here, for now, bound to this inexplicable late-night ritual. That is the shape of it. The noises persist, unmistakably cutlery and plates. No culprit visible, no neighbor confessing. The landlord is indifferent. The owner assures me the bakery is locked tight, secured. Yet night upon night, the clinking returns. An acoustic anomaly? Or something else entirely? I only know the weariness of it, the dread of lying awake, waiting for that metallic signature to echo up through my floor. It always comes back. Sometimes, in the deepest hours, it feels as though the building itself is partaking in some secret, solitary repast in the darkness below. I despise the notion, yet cannot shake it. All that remains is to endure. I dread the nights, but I navigate the days. I work, I return home, I listen. The sound, I suspect, will never cease, and I possess no key to its silence. There is no grand revelation, no neat conclusion. There is only me, this apartment, and the late-night dinner noise that defies all explanation. The instant the filament bulbs winked into oblivion, plunging the Ashworth residence into an absolute dark that swallowed the rooms whole. I understood. This wouldn't be just another few hours earning pocket money. As Lily and Finn's thin, sharp cries pierced the sudden silence, the mundane evening fractured, revealing the terrifying night coiled beneath. The true horror, I'd soon learn, wasn't the absence of light, but the presence lurking within the newly born shadows. My name is Clara. For half a year, I'd been the Ashworth's sitter. Pleasant family, sprawling suburban house, 2 children. Lily, 8, sharp and observant. Finn, 6, perpetually clutching a crayon. Usually straightforward. Oversee homework, conjure dinner, perhaps a film before the ritual of bedtime. Tonight felt different. A static charge lingered in the air. Mrs. Ashworth, handing over the emergency numbers, seemed strung tight as piano wire. Her gaze kept skittering to the darkening windows. "We aim for midnight," she'd murmured, voice thin. "There have been disquieting incidents nearby. Keep everything locked up tight, won't you?" I offered a placating nod, dismissing it as the usual neighborhood static. Minor thefts, eccentric neighbors, nothing more. The Ashworth's tail lights bled into the dusk, and I settled into the familiar rhythm. For a while, normalcy held. Lily wrestled with fractions, while Finn rendered a vibrant, chaotic world on construction paper at the broad kitchen table. We ate, tidied, and were poised to unbox a board game when the house blinked. Once, twice. Then, complete negation of light. The suddenness was a physical blow. I heard Lily and Finn gasp beside me. "It's all right," I managed, pitching my voice towards a calm I didn't feel. "Just the power grid acting up. Let me find a torch." My phone's weak screen cast a ghostly pallor as I navigated towards the utility closet Mrs. Ashworth had pointed out months ago. Locating a hefty flashlight, I thumbed it on. A stark cone of light sliced through the blackness, and then I heard it. A soft, deliberate impact from the floor above, like something substantial being carefully placed. A cold fist clenched around my heart. "Lily? Finn? Did you two wander upstairs?" Lily's voice, startlingly close behind me, made me flinch. "No, Clara, we're right here." I swept the beam around, illuminating their small, pale faces, eyes wide as saucers. If they were here, what had made that sound? "Right," I said, the word brittle. "Let's camp out in the living room. Wait for the lights to return." We huddled on the sofa, the flashlight beam projecting dancing grotesques onto the far wall. Lily and Finn burrowed against me, their slight frames vibrating with unspoken fear. Another sound from upstairs, louder this time. A distinct, heavy footfall. Unmistakable. "Someone's in the house," Finn whispered, his voice a trembling thread. I wanted to refute him, to conjure explanations of settling foundations or rattling branches. But a primal certainty resonated deep within me. Someone, something, was up there. "Listen carefully," I breathed, my mouth suddenly arid. "We're going to walk, very quietly, to the front door. Then we run straight to the neighbors. Got it?" Twin nods, solemn and terrified. We rose with excruciating slowness. I guided them forward, the flashlight's beam jittering, betraying the tremor in my hand. Halfway across the foyer, a floorboard groaned overhead. Footsteps, moving with purpose towards the stairwell. Ice-water dread flooded my veins. The front door was too far, too exposed. "Quick!" The whisper tore from my throat. "Hide!" I propelled Lily and Finn into the cramped coat closet by the entrance, tumbling in after them, pulling the door almost shut. We pressed together in the suffocating dark, the scent of wool and cedar sharp in my nostrils. Breathing felt like a betrayal. Above the frantic thrumming in my ears, the footsteps descended, slow, measured treads exploring the ground floor. I felt Lily and Finn trembling against me, stifling tiny choked sobs. A beam, brighter than my own, painted a stripe of light across the gap beneath the closet door. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat I feared would give us away. The footsteps halted directly outside our flimsy sanctuary. An eternity stretched, suspended in silence. I held my breath, arms clamped protectively around the children. Go away, please, just go away. Then, mercifully, the steps moved on, retreating towards the kitchen at the rear of the house. A ragged breath escaped me. Okay, I whispered, the sound barely audible even to myself. When I open this, we run. Straight for the front door. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run. Understand? More silent nods, faces ghostly in the slivers of light penetrating the door slats. My hand, slick with sweat, reached for the knob. Trembling, I turned it, easing the door open a fraction. The hallway stretched empty before us. Our chance. Now! I hissed, throwing the door wide. We exploded from the closet, a tangle of limbs sprinting for freedom. My fingers, numb and clumsy with adrenaline, fumbled at the deadbolt. Behind us, a sharp cry, the unmistakable thud of running feet accelerating on the hardwood floor. The lock finally yielded. The door swung open, and we spilled out into the cool, damp night air. Run! I screamed, shoving the children ahead. We pelted down the driveway, shoes slapping on the asphalt. A backward glance, compelled by terror. A figure silhouetted in the open doorway. My blood turned to ice as I saw it wasn't alone. 2, then 3, vague silhouettes detached themselves from the deeper black within the house. We fled towards the nearest welcoming porch light, pounding frantically on the solid wood door. Help! Please, let us in! Help! The door swung inward, revealing a woman in her bathrobe, face etched with alarm. I pushed Lily and Finn inside, stumbling after them, slamming the door shut. Call the police, I gasped, lungs burning, leaning heavily against the frame. The woman, Mrs. Gable, I'd later learn, blessedly wasted no time on questions, snatching her phone and dialing 911 while I collapsed onto her floral sofa with the children, all 3 of us shaking violently, tears finally breaking free. The ensuing hour unfolded in a maelstrom of flashing lights and urgent voices. Police swarmed the Ashworth property, their beams cutting methodical paths through the darkness. They documented a forced entry via a rear window, but the intruders had vanished as completely as the electricity. When the Ashworths arrived, summoned from their interrupted evening, the scene was pure, raw panic. Mrs. Ashworth clutched her children, silent tears carving paths down her face. Mr. Ashworth gripped my shoulder, his gratitude fervent, repeating his thanks until the words blurred. As the initial chaos subsided, one of the officers drew me aside, his expression somber. "You were incredibly brave tonight, Clara," he said, his voice low. "But you need to understand something. We've seen a pattern of break-ins around here lately. This is the first time they've targeted an occupied house." He paused, his gaze heavy. "And?" I prompted, a fresh wave of cold washing over me. "And in every single prior incident, we discovered hidden cameras planted inside. These aren't your typical burglars. They've been watching, biding their time. Nausea coiled low in my stomach. How long? How long had unseen eyes been observing the Ashworths, observing me during those seemingly ordinary evenings? The officer continued, his words like stones dropped into a well. We suspect they were specifically interested in the children. If you hadn't been present tonight. He let the sentence hang, unfinished, but brutally clear. The implication sent a fresh wave of sickness through me. In the days that bled into weeks, the feeling of being watched became a suffocating shroud. Every creak of the floorboards, every unexpected shadow sent jolts of adrenaline through me. Sleep offered no refuge, haunted by the recurring image of those dark shapes spilling from the Ashworth's doorway. The family moved shortly after, the house irrevocably tainted by the trauma. I couldn't fault them. I stopped babysitting entirely. The thought of holding responsibility for young lives within darkened walls became an unbearable weight. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, questions surface like phantom limbs. Who were they? What precisely did they intend for Lily and Finn? And the most chilling query, are they still adrift in the world, observing, anticipating another chance? I tell myself that danger has passed, that we are secure now. Yet, a deeper, colder knowledge persists. The night concluded, but the nightmare lingers, embedded in my marrow. Every unlit room, every unexplained noise, every hesitant flicker of a bulb holds the latent promise of terror. So now, I leave lights burning, double-check the locks, and sleep fitfully, perpetually half-aware. Because I learned that the monsters children fear are not confined to imagination. Sometimes they are terrifyingly real. Sometimes they are descending the stairs, just beyond the flashlight's fragile reach. That night irrevocably altered me, altered all of us, I suspect. It stripped away the comforting illusion of safety, revealing the potential for menace hidden within the mundane. But it also unearthed the ferocity I hadn't known I possessed, a protective instinct that roared to life when those children were imperiled. I no longer watch over sleeping children, but I've begun volunteering at a local women's shelter, channeling that protective energy toward others confronting terrors within their own homes. It is my small rebellion against the darkness, an attempt to inject slivers of light. Yet, regardless of the time that passes, the memory remains indelible. The night the familiar world extinguished, and the shadows stirred. The night I discovered that sometimes the most dreadful monsters aren't lurking under the bed. They're already inside the house. The antique brass key grated, a low growl in the lock mechanism, before finally surrendering with a decisive thud. As Ilara nudged the heavy pine door inward, a peculiar premonition prickled her skin. This wasn't merely opening a rented space for the month. It felt like unlatching something far more consequential. She hadn't an inkling then that she was stepping across the threshold into a crucible, a solitary nightmare poised to dismantle her convictions about refuge and self-reliance. A month she'd booked it for, a desperate flight from the city's relentless thrum, the crushing weight of her demanding career. Seclusion, the advertisement had whispered. Tranquility, a communion with the wild. No signal bars, no digital tether. Just Ilara and the immense breathing quietude of the forest. Perfection, or so it seemed. The cabin possessed a raw-boned charm. One cavernous room beneath a sleeping loft, a rudimentary kitchenette tucked into a corner, and a stone hearth that commanded the far wall like an ancient altar. Pine resin and the ghost of wood smoke hung in the air, a scent that momentarily loosened the knots cinched tight across her shoulders. That initial day dissolved in the rhythms of settling, unpacking provisions, mapping the immediate territory of whispering woods. Autumn breathed cool and sharp, carrying the fragrance of decaying leaves and the far-off lonely cries of unseen birds. When twilight bled into true dark, she coaxed flames to life in the hearth, sinking into the embrace of a worn, forgiving sofa with a novel, feeling a profound ease she hadn't known in years. It was in the deep, starless hours that the first discordant note sounded. She surfaced from sleep adrift, the fire reduced to a faint, orange pulse. Something had snagged the edge of her dreams, pulling her awake, yet the cause remained elusive. Lying utterly still, straining against the profound silence, she identified it. Footfalls, muffled yet undeniably present, tracing a path across the cabin's worn floorboards. Ice water sluiced through her veins. She was utterly alone, swallowed by miles of wilderness. No one else should be here. She held her breath captive, listening with an intensity that made her ears ache. But the sound ceased. After an agonizing interval of charged silence, she persuaded herself it was the groan of old timbers, the scuttling of some nocturnal creature on the roof. A city dweller's jitters, surely, unaccustomed to the forest's subtle symphony. Sleep reclaimed her, though it was a thin, troubled veil. Morning arrived, but the residue of unease clung like damp mist. As Elara moved through the cabin's familiar space, brewing coffee, slicing bread, a persistent wrongness nagged. The rocking chair by the window, hadn't she left it angled slightly more towards the fire? The paperback on the small table, she could have sworn it was on the nightstand upstairs. Trifles easily rationalized away, yet they accumulated like tiny burrs beneath her thoughts. The subsequent days brought more subtle disturbances. Returning from a long hike through sun-dappled woods, she'd find a window latch unsecured, a window she distinctly remembered fastening. One dawn, she awoke to find every single cupboard door in the kitchenette swung wide, a silent, gaping chorus. Each incident met her strained logic. Perhaps she was more absent-minded than she realized. Perhaps the profound isolation was breeding paranoia. But the fifth night shattered all attempts at rationalization. She jolted awake, that same visceral sense of wrongness ripping her from slumber. As her vision swam into focus in the near-absolute dark, she saw it. A shape, standing motionless at the foot of her loft bed, watching. Her blood felt thick and cold, a mere silhouette against the gloom, utterly still. She squeezed her eyes shut, a desperate, silent prayer forming. Let it be gone when I look. When courage finally returned, enough to peel her eyelids open, the space was empty. The remainder of the night was spent burrowed deep beneath the quilts. Every sigh of the wind, every settling creak of the cabin, triggering a full-body flinch. With the first gray light, the urge to pack, to flee, was almost overwhelming. Yet, a stubborn sliver of her mind insisted. A stress-induced phantasm, a nightmare given unusual potency by her overtaxed imagination. She resolved to stay, though the decision felt brittle. Unease became her shadow. She developed rituals, double-locking the door, triple-checking window latches, constructing crude alarms from empty cans balanced precariously, a length of fishing line strung with tiny scavenged bells across the main threshold. A weighty maglite became her constant companion, resting beside her pillow, part illumination, part cudgel. For a brief interlude, perhaps 2 days, an illusion of normalcy settled. No spectral footsteps, no mysteriously opened cupboards. Ilara began, cautiously, to breathe again, losing herself in the rustle of leaves underfoot during long walks, finding solace in the fire's hypnotic dance. She even managed a shaky laugh at her own expense, mocking her earlier fright. Then came the night that unraveled everything. She woke not to silence, but to sound, humming. A soft, strangely sweet melody drifting up from the main room below. Her first thought, a forgotten radio, died instantly. There was no radio, and even if there were, the cabin sat in a dead zone, impervious to broadcast signals. Clutching the maglite, its cold metal a small comfort, she crept down the narrow loft stairs. The humming ceased abruptly. In the faint, flickering glow cast by the dying embers, she discerned a figure seated in the armchair near the window. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat threatening to escape her chest. Who's there? The question emerged as a ragged croak, barely audible. Slowly, deliberately, the figure rose. Ilara instinctively raised the flashlight, her thumb hovering over the switch, ready. But the beam's sudden glare didn't illuminate a stranger. It illuminated her, or rather, a chillingly precise replica. The same fall of dark hair, the identical slope of the cheekbones, even clad in a perfect copy of the worn flannel pajamas she herself was wearing. The doppelganger offered a smile, but it held no warmth, only a predatory gleam in eyes that were unnervingly familiar. "Who are you?" Ilara whispered, her voice trembling violently. "What is it you want?" The other Ilara tilted its head, the unnerving smile fixed. When it spoke, the voice was hers, yet threaded with an alien resonance that raised the hairs on her arms. "I'm you," it stated, with terrifying simplicity. "The you that this place recognizes." Ilara shook her head, stumbling backward. "No, impossible. You can't be. I'm me." For every retreating step she took, it advanced one, gliding across the floorboards. "I've been patiently waiting for you to truly see," it murmured, "trying to make you understand. This place isn't meant for you. You should go." Her back met the rough-hewn logs of the wall. She was trapped. The thing wearing her face stood only an arm's length away. "Why?" she choked out, buying seconds, her mind racing frantically for an escape route from this waking nightmare. "Why do I have to leave?" The doppelganger's smile stretched, revealing slightly too many teeth. "Because," it purred, "if you don't choose to leave, I will be forced to remove you. And you won't appreciate the method. The others certainly didn't." Others. The word landed like a physical blow. Had this cabin claimed victims before, renters seeking peace who simply vanished? In that sliver of horrified distraction, it lunged. Pure instinct propelled her arm forward, swinging the heavy flashlight. It connected with a sickening, solid thwack. The replica staggered back, its mirrored features twisting into a mask of shock and incandescent rage. Ilara didn't hesitate. She scrambled for the door, her fingers clumsy and numb as they fumbled with the stubborn lock. Behind her, she heard it recovering, the quickening patter of its footsteps closing the distance. The lock finally yielded. The door flew open, and she plunged into the bracing shock of the night air. She ran, heedless, into the black embrace of the woods. Low branches lashed her face like whips. Unseen roots clawed at her ankles, threatening to send her sprawling. She could hear the pursuit, a steady, unnervingly rhythmic breathing that never seemed to falter. She ran until her lungs burned like acid and her legs turned to unresponsive stone. When collapse felt imminent, she threw herself behind the massive girth of a fallen, moss-covered tree, clamping a hand over her mouth to stifle her ragged gasps. She listened, every nerve ending screaming, straining for any sound of pursuit, but the forest had fallen profoundly, unnaturally silent. For what felt like an eternity, she remained huddled there, paralyzed by a terror too deep for movement. Only when the first tentative fingers of dawn painted the eastern sky did she dare to peer out from her refuge. Nothing. No sign of the other Alara, no trace of anything amiss. Slowly, trembling, she navigated her way back towards the cabin. In the pale, watery light of morning, it looked deceptively ordinary, but the illusion was shattered. She knew she couldn't remain another second. She flung her belongings into her duffel bag with frantic haste, not caring about order or tidiness. Escape was the only imperative. As she reached for the door handle, ready to bolt for the final time, her gaze snagged on something lying atop the small entryway table. A folded piece of paper. It hadn't been there before. With hands that shook uncontrollably, she unfolded it. The script was chillingly familiar, her own looping cursive. It read, "Next time, heed the whispers. Not all guardians are as lenient as I. This sanctuary is not yours. Do not return." She dropped the note as if it were burning coals and fled to her car, engine roaring to life in the stillness. She didn't look back, not once, as she tore down the winding gravel track, leaving the woods and their secrets behind. She drove relentlessly until the familiar cacophony and concrete embrace of the city swallowed her whole. In the ensuing days and weeks, she waged a war within herself, trying desperately to categorize the ordeal as a product of extreme stress, a waking hallucination born of isolation. But a deeper, colder certainty resided within her. Something inexplicable, something ancient and terrifying, had transpired in that remote cabin. She never recounted the full tale. Who would possibly believe such a story? But the woods remained forbidden territory, the allure of secluded cabins forever tainted. Solitude, once a craving, now felt like an open invitation to the uncanny. Sometimes, late at night, a flicker of movement in the periphery of a mirror, a fleeting distortion in a darkened window pane, makes her breath catch. For a heart-stopping instant, she sees that other self, still watching, still waiting. And she wonders, with a dread that never truly fades, if she ever truly escaped that night, or if a fragment of her remains lost in those woods, destined to become the next whisper of warning for whoever dares seek peace in that haunted place. The tranquility she sought had exacted a terrible price, leaving her with the chilling knowledge that the most monstrous reflection is sometimes found within oneself. "Those golden morsels," Leo declared, the loose coins in his pocket clinking musically. "They're a pilgrimage worth making." Midnight loomed, and our collective brain power, fueled by hours of biological diagrams and lukewarm coffee, had sputtered out. Only the distant, pulsating glow of the arches, 3 blocks hence, offered the greasy salvation needed to conquer the final stretch of exam preparation. Clara and Ben, mirroring my own exhaustion, nodded with fervent agreement. textbooks already sliding into backpacks. The university library had shuttered its doors an hour prior, marooning us in the sterile brightness of the 24-hour cafe, a sanctuary that now felt insufficient. We craved substance, even if that substance came breaded, fried, and accompanied by suspiciously perfect fries. A cool premonition of rain tinged the night air as we ventured out. The street lay hushed, breathing softly with the rhythm of faraway traffic. Our town never truly slept, merely drifted in a shallow doze. Streetlights painted pools of amber at intervals, our shadows elongating and contracting like phantom limbs on the pavement canvas. The intricacies of gene splicing, Clara began, her voice a low murmur. But my attention snagged on a figure ahead. Near the corner, a woman, draped in the ghost of a business suit, stained, crumpled, defiant of its original purpose, paced with frantic energy, conducting a vehement, one-sided conversation. Her hair was a tumultuous cloud, framing a face lost in its own storm. "Maybe we cross," I murmured, nudging Leo towards the opposite curb. Yet, before the thought could fully translate into action, the woman's head jerked up. Her gaze, sharp and unnervingly direct, pinned us. A prickle traced my spine. "They're coming!" The cry ripped through the quiet, bouncing off the brick facades. "All around! You don't see them!" She lurched towards us, her movements spasmodic, unpredictable. Her hands clenched something indistinct in the dim light. Instinctively, we quickened our steps, aiming for brisk passage, not flight. Running, a lesson learned on other late campus nights, often inflamed rather than deterred. But she matched our pace, then surpassed it, her voice escalating into a ragged shriek. "Don't turn away, they're watching, right now." A sharp crack echoed behind us. A backward glance revealed fractured stones littering the sidewalk. The woman was scrabbling for more along a landscaped border, her agitation mounting visibly. "Run," Leo breathed, the command barely audible, and we broke stride, desperation lending velocity. She pursued, a whirlwind of incoherent screams and airborne projectiles. Pebbles rained down. One ricocheted off Ben's backpack with a dull thud. Another whistled past my ear, terrifyingly close. Her footfalls hammered the pavement behind, a relentless, impossibly swift drumbeat. The golden beacon of our original goal seemed to recede with every frantic step. Then, Clara spotted it. The illuminated windows of the campus security outpost. Not the haven we sought, but the sanctuary we needed. We veered, sprinting towards the light, the woman's cries and the pounding pursuit tightening the knot of fear in my chest. "In your heads! I see them! Stop running!" Another rock skittered beside me. The security office door, though perhaps only 50 feet distant, stretched into an agonizing mile. My lungs burned, fear unlocking reserves of speed I hadn't known I possessed. The officer, alerted perhaps by the cacophony piercing his open window, was already swinging the door inward as we stumbled onto the threshold, pulling us into the relative safety of the lit office. Ilara halted abruptly at the edge of the floodlight's glare, stones still clutched tight, her eyes wide, unfocused, mirroring the chaos within. "Evening, Ilara," Officer Reyes stated, his tone measured calm as he stepped past us onto the pavement. His presence was a quiet assertion of control. "Bit of a rough night?" The woman, Ilara, ceased her screaming, though her breath hitched in ragged gasps. The stones tumbled, forgotten from her grasp. "They're everywhere, Officer Reyes," she whispered, her voice suddenly small, fragile. "Inside their heads, everyone's. I had to warn them." A vague gesture indicated us, her body swaying precariously. "I understand," Officer Reyes replied softly, his gaze steady on hers. "Perhaps we should call Dr. Sharma. She has a way of helping clear the fog, doesn't she?" He reached deliberately for his radio, never breaking contact. Ilara's shoulders slumped, the frantic energy visibly draining away. We would learn later that Ilara was known to campus security, a former brilliant academic derailed by a severe mental health crisis, prone to paranoid episodes when adrift from her medication. Dr. Anya Sharma, we discovered, was her dedicated crisis counselor. That single, terrifying encounter became a catalyst. Campus safety protocols underwent a quiet revolution. The cafe initiated a partnership with a local delivery service, bringing sustenance directly to bleary-eyed scholars. Emergency call boxes sprouted along familiar pathways like metallic bluebells. The student government established a volunteer escort collective for nocturnal journeys. Crucially, the university amplified its mental health outreach, assembling a dedicated crisis response team trained specifically for navigating the fragile terrain of mental health emergencies. Ilara herself was guided towards more robust support structures, including a supervised medication regimen. In the ensuing months, glimpses of Ilara became part of the campus tapestry. Not a figure of fear, but a quiet presence in the library's alcoves or walking beside her counselor. Stabilized, she possessed a different aura. Composed, dignified. Though her eyes held a residual sadness, we now comprehended more deeply. Our study group's late-night hunger pangs persisted, but our approach transformed. Deliveries arrived, we walked in larger constellations or requested escorts, not from lingering fear, but from a broadened awareness that safety encompassed everyone, including those grappling with unseen battles. The cafe became a forum for mental health dialogues, hosting counselors who illuminated the signs of crisis and pathways to constructive response. Officer Reyes led workshops on de-escalation, imparting skills to navigate volatility with safety and empathy. Clara, pursuing psychology, centered her final project on community mental health integration, interviewing Dr. Sharma about crisis intervention, exploring the delicate balance between compassion and self-preservation. Her work seeded a peer support initiative, empowering students to recognize and react appropriately to mental health distress. Only last week, I observed 2 students gently guiding a disoriented individual towards the campus health center, maintaining a respectful distance while offering clear concern. Textbook execution of the workshop principles. The person received aid. Escalation was averted. The stones Ilara threw that night reside in a glass jar on Officer Reyes's desk, not as grim trophies, but as tangible teaching aids. He employs them in safety seminars, illustrating the precipitous speed at which situations can unravel, and the profound difference the right response can make. Because the indelible lesson of that night wasn't about menace, but about the fragility of minds struggling against internal tempests. True security, we learned, isn't merely erecting barriers against perceived threats. It's weaving a communal fabric strong enough to support everyone. Now, when late-night walks enter conversation, the focus drifts towards resources, not just risks. We've learned to discern the nuance between genuine danger and a desperate cry for help. More profoundly, we've grasped that the most potent antidote to fear lies in cultivating robust systems of support, embracing the entire community in their fold. The wipers smeared curtains of rain across the windscreen, a frantic, inadequate rhythm against the deluge. Through the blurring glass, the highway ribboned into an oppressive dark, utterly devoid of solace or signpost. Hours bled together behind the wheel, Silas's grip a white-knuckled vice, a silent testament to the folly of this supposed shortcut. Rain hammered the roof, a relentless drumbeat against the silence, until the radio sputtered, a ghost of sound in the watery void. He reached, desperate for connection, for a forecast, anything. But the voice that crackled through the static iced his veins. Attention motorists. Authorities seek information regarding escaped inmate Corbin Vance, believed to be in the vicinity of County Route 17. Vance is considered armed and exceptionally volatile. Do not engage. A glance at the glowing map confirmed it. County Route 17, this very thread of asphalt beneath his tires. His pulse hammered against his ribs. He strained his eyes against the night, peering past the sweep of the headlights. And then, he saw him, a silhouette materializing from the downpour at the road's edge, arm extended, thumb upturned in that ancient plea for passage. Closer now, details swam into focus. A man, drenched, clothes clinging like a second skin to a gaunt frame. Every rational nerve shrieked, "Drive on!" Yet an unseen current slowed the vehicle. Was it the ghost of empathy, recalling moments of his own vulnerability? Or that insidious whisper arguing probability, the unlikelihood of this man being the man? Whatever the force, the tires bit into the sodden gravel of the shoulder with a reluctant crunch. The figure hastened to the passenger side. Silas cracked the window, a sliver against the storm. "My gratitude," the man rasped, his voice thin against the roar of the rain. Stranded back there, car gave up the ghost miles ago. Silas hesitated, fingers hovering near the lock. Destination? "Just the next town," he offered, a strained smile flashing white in the gloom. "Got people there. They'll sort me out." Against the frantic alarm bells in his skull, Silas thumbed the unlock button. "Get in," he managed, aiming for nonchalance, hearing only the tremor beneath. He slid inside, bringing the chill of the storm and another scent. Something acrid, faintly metallic, unsettlingly familiar. As the car merged back onto the slick tarmac, Silas risked a sideways glance. Younger than first perceived, perhaps early 30s. Dark hair plastered to his brow, a shadow of stubble darkening his jaw. But it was the eyes that snagged Silas's attention. Obsidian pools, intense, flicking about the cabin, meticulously inventorying the space. "Silas," he volunteered, slicing through the heavy quiet. "Your name?" A pause, just fractionally too long. "Call me Cole," the man replied. "Again, much obliged. Not everyone stops for a drowned rat on a night like this." Silas offered a tight nod, gaze fixed firmly ahead. "Figure I'd want the same courtesy." Silence descended again, thick and palpable, punctuated only by the hypnotic swish thump of the wipers and the rain's muffled drumming. Silas felt the weight of Cole's stare, a prickling awareness crawling up his spine. "So, Silas," Cole's voice startled him, sharp in the confined space. What errand brings you down this lonely vein of nowhere in this weather? He swallowed, throat suddenly parched. Returning from business, chose the scenic route. Silas lied, the words tasting like ash, beginning to think it was a poor choice. Cole emitted a low chuckle, devoid of warmth. Funny things, shortcuts, sometimes they lead precisely where you never meant to be. Silas merely nodded, adrift for a reply. The quiet stretched, taut as a wire. His grip on the wheel tightened, palm slick despite the car's cool air. "Mind the radio?" Cole asked, his hand already drifting towards the console. "Go ahead," Silas agreed, welcoming any noise to rupture the tension. Static hissed and spat as Cole scanned the frequencies, finally landing on a clear station. The same one. Authorities reiterate the warning. Fugitive Corbin Vance remains at large, serving consecutive life terms for multiple homicides. Considered extremely dangerous. Last observed wearing dark trousers and a jacket. Silas felt the blood abandon his face. The description mirrored his passenger with chilling precision. His gaze flicked to the rearview mirror, locking onto Cole's, no, Vance's eyes. In that charged instant, recognition sparked between them. He knew, and Vance knew he knew. The air in the car shifted, ionized. The simmering unease ignited into palpable menace. Silas saw Vance's hand inch towards the pocket of his sodden jacket. "Pull over," Vance commanded, his voice a low, gravelly threat. Silas's mind scrambled, a frantic search for an escape hatch from this unfolding nightmare. Isolation pressed in, miles from anywhere, no other lights piercing the gloom. Stopping now was a death sentence. "I said, pull over," Vance snarled, his knuckles white around something concealed within his pocket. Instead of braking, instinct screamed louder than fear. Silas slammed his foot down. The engine roared, tires scrabbling for purchase on the treacherous surface. Vance jolted backward, a curse ripping from his throat. "What in God's name are you doing?" he yelled, struggling to regain balance. "Staying alive," Silas shot back, surprised at the unexpected firmness in his own voice. What ensued was a terrifying ballet of speed and desperation on the winding, rain-lashed highway. Vance lunged, grasping for the wheel, attempting to wrench them into the abyss. Silas fought him, the car fishtailing wildly, a prayer forming unspoken on his lips. Amidst the chaos, Vance's hand slipped, revealing its hidden cargo. A vicious-looking blade, its steel catching the faint dashboard light with a predatory gleam. Silas's heart seized. "You're making this difficult, Silas," Vance breathed, his voice unnervingly calm as he brandished the knife. "Just stop the car. I'll make it clean." "Never," Silas spat, eyes darting between the road ahead and the menacing steel. Then, a flicker. Headlights. Distant, but approaching. The first sign of other life in what felt like an eternity. Hope, fragile and fierce, surged within him. If he could just reach them. Vance saw them too. A mask of fury twisted his features as his window of isolation snapped shut. With a guttural roar, he lunged again, the knife slicing air. Silas wrenched the wheel violently right. The world dissolved into a dizzying vortex of rain-streaked darkness. A strangled cry from Vance, a blur of motion as he slammed against the passenger door. Then, a sickening metallic shriek, and abrupt, jarring stillness. The airbag detonated, momentarily blinding Silas. As clarity slowly returned through a haze of pain and powder, two facts registered: the rising wail of sirens and the stark emptiness of the seat beside him. He fumbled with the seatbelt, each movement igniting fresh agony. Staggering from the crumpled wreck, he saw a dark shape detach itself from the wreckage, stumbling, limping towards the dense woods flanking the highway. The sirens crescendoed, bathing the scene in strobing red and blue. Police cruisers and an ambulance skidded to a halt. As paramedics descended, assessing his injuries, Silas overheard an officer's urgent radio transmission. Suspect sighted entering woods off County Route 17. Requesting all units converge. Subject is on foot, possibly injured. Strapped onto a gurney, lifted into the ambulance, fragments of police chatter drifted towards him. They'd been closing in on Vance for hours, always a step behind. If Silas hadn't stopped, hadn't heard the broadcast, hadn't risked that damnable shortcut. The counterfactual spun, a dizzying spiral as shock began its cold embrace. In the ensuing days, cocooned in the sterile quiet of a hospital room, punctuated by police interviews, the enormity settled. He had stared into the abyss of a killer's eyes, and somehow, inexplicably, stepped back from the edge. Corbin Vance was apprehended 2 days later, cornered in a derelict barn near the crash site. 3 dead since his escape, they said. Silas had nearly been the 4th. Now, the sight of a lone figure by the roadside triggers an involuntary echo of that rain-lashed night. A part of him feels the tug of shared humanity, the impulse to offer aid, but a larger, colder part remembers the glint of polished steel, the predatory stillness in Vance's eyes. That part keeps the doors locked, the accelerator pressed down, because sometimes the most perilous shortcuts aren't on any map. They are the leaps of faith we take with trust itself. It registered sometime after midnight, deep in the marrow of the evening, when the sole illumination seeped from the street lamp's sodium glow beyond the window. I was folded into the old wing-back chair beside the cold hearth, its upholstery breathing a spectral perfume of defunct tobacco and sodden timber, attempting to leash the tremors that followed another day, coiled tight with apprehension. Silence had woven itself around me, a palpable shroud, and I recall the cloying warmth of my own respiration in my nostrils. It was then, at the furthest periphery of sight, that I perceived it, an obscurity undulating across the distant wall. My head snapped around, vertebrae grinding from static hours. Nothing ought to have been there. The standing lamp slumbered in its corner, draperies were drawn tight, admitting only that frail amber wash from the street. The room held only me, yet, unmistakably, again, an ebon silhouette flowed with liquid grace upon the pale plaster, as if projected by some form standing between the wall and a non-existent light. A shade untethered from substance. Slowly, I rose. My knees protested, sinews taut, a faint vibration humming in my fingertips. I ventured toward it. Each footfall coaxed a sibilant groan from the floor timbers, a sound I felt resonating behind my teeth. As my proximity increased, the phenomenon retreated, not vanishing, but rather liquefying into the room's deeper shadows, compressing itself into angles and junctures, as if indigenous to them. It behaved like some cornered creature, flinching from my advance, yet refusing dissolution. My hand swept across the smooth, cool paint where it had been, finding only void. Barely a week prior, I'd arrived at this antiquated dwelling, bequeathed by a kinsman whose face was a vague memory. My intention? A scant few nights sorting through accumulated detritus, papers, furnishings, assessing salvageable fragments before listing the property. No grand manor this, merely a low-slung house terminating a slender lane in a somnolent town. The sort of place steeped in an age that felt excessive, its partitions hoarding recollections best left undisturbed. Still, no other destination clamored for my presence, and I'd convinced myself a measure of disquiet was endurable. The shadow first manifested on the third night. Before that, strangeness had merely insinuated itself, a persistent aroma blending aged varnish with something ferrous, the arid taste lingering in my mouth despite the rain drumming outside, the electric prickle on my skin whenever traversing the corridor that fed into this main room. And then there was the antique looking glass unearthed from a storage closet. Oval, its frame nicked along the edges, a faint, nebulous swirl clouding its core. It rendered my reflection subtly wrong, the mercury seeming reluctant to capture my true likeness. I'd propped it, provisionally, against a corner wall. Following that initial, abortive confrontation with the shadow, the remainder of the night was spent rigid in the wing-back chair, every muscle fiber pulled taut. Sporadically, a swift slither would snag my peripheral awareness, a dark, fluidic line drifting over the far plaster. Each time I turned directly, it recoiled, seeking refuge behind bookshelves or merging with the contours of furniture. A sudden rush toward it prompted instant dissipation, and when I aimed my torch beam squarely at its locus, the light sliced clean through vacant air. No form, no profile. Yet, the instant I resettled, diverting my gaze, it would rematerialize, often closer than before. Depleted, I courted sleep, a futile endeavor. Each descent towards oblivion was arrested by the sensation of scrutiny, an unseen presence yanking me awake. A clammy film slicked my skin. My heart hammered a frantic, unyielding rhythm. Finally, as dawn's pallor bled through the window seams, I compelled myself towards practicality. I strode into the cramped kitchen, splashed frigid water onto my face, brewed coffee. It tasted acrid, metallic against my tongue, yet it anchored me. I resolved to scrutinize the house by daylight, hunting for some rationale. Morning sun, strained through the curtains, illuminated dancing dust motes and furniture grimed with neglect. I probed antiquated shelves, resistant drawers, stacks of my uncle's neglected documents. Nothing elucidated the nocturnal visitation. Nevertheless, the mirror drew my focus. Its antiquity surpassed the house's other contents. Etched into the timber frame were peculiar motifs, looping lines, and minuscule, notch-like carvings I hadn't previously discerned. Tracing them with the fingertip, I felt the shallow indentations. Unease coiled within me. I shrouded the mirror with a dust sheet, placing it face down against the wall. The remainder of the day unspooled with deceptive tranquility. I constructed rationalizations, the erratic sweep of headlights from a passing vehicle, phantoms born of exhausted eyes. Departure flickered as an option, yet the obligation to sift through the remnants held me fast. That afternoon, I sought repose, stretching out on the sofa, the wind's fingers rattling the window panes, and almost succumbed to drowsiness. Nightfall instantly resurrected the tension. The moment the sun relinquished its hold, the atmosphere thickened. I armed myself, a heavy torch gripped tight, a kerosene lantern casting a flickering circle near the exit, my phone's feeble screen a tertiary light source. I waited in the living room, throat parched, posture poised for something. For a spell, only silence reigned, punctuated by the frantic timpani of my own pulse. Then, a flicker, the shadow, extruding itself from behind the shrouded mirror. I could have sworn it seeped from beneath the fabric like ink bleeding through paper. Its movement possessed a new audacity, charting a course along the wall above the hearth. Gradually, it coalesced into shapes, geometric arrays, configurations resembling warped runes. It was not static, it flowed and elongated, birthing one symbol after another, as if demanding witness, demanding comprehension of a language I couldn't parse. Again, I attempted approach, breath catching in short, sharp gasps. Proximity triggered its retreat, darting into the corner by an old bureau. Frustration surged, raw and hot. I yelled at it, my voice swallowed by the room's hollow acoustics. The shadow offered no sound, yet I sensed a shift, its presence palpably condensing the air. My skin crawled. Fear tasted sharp and corrosive at the back of my throat. I stabbed the torch beam where it had lurked. Nothing. Only wan plaster and the trembling moisture on my upper lip. A realization dawned. It pursued me when my back was turned. I tested the hypothesis, stepping away, feigning disregard. From the corner of my eye, I watched the darkness glide along the wall, inching nearer, wrapping around door frames and shelves, maneuvering to position itself behind me. Each swift pivot sent it recoiling. A game of cat and mouse, utterly unnerving. A different strategy was required. My thoughts returned to the mirror. If this entity was bound to that relic, roused perhaps by my uncovering it, maybe I could compel it back, or at least gain insight. Heart slamming against my ribs, I moved toward the mirror's resting place, gaze partially averted. Kneeling, I grasped the frame's edges, slowly tilting it upright. My arm quivered as I peeled away the sheet. The mirror's face was tarnished, almost opaque, as if trapping a fine membrane of dust between the glass and reality. I angled it, seeking any available light. Behind me, a faint rasping, like a nail dragged across wood. I swung the mirror to face the wall where the shadow had lingered, hoping for reflection, for revelation of its source. But watching the glass, I saw only my own form, limned against the dim room. Then, something else disturbed the surface. A ripple of pure black, a shape slicing across the reflected backdrop. With a strangled cry, I slammed the mirror face down onto the floorboards, the impact jarring the room. My breathing came ragged. The shadow fragmented momentarily, fleeing toward the ceiling's gloom. Sweat drenched me now. The lantern flame guttered, the sudden deepening of shadows making my stomach clench. I felt the house's immense weight bearing down, the aged wood and plaster absorbing my terror like a sponge. Flight beckoned. Grab the keys, drive into the night. But responsibility held me. What if it followed? What if it inhabited reflective planes, lurking just behind me whenever the lights went out? There was no retreat, only passage through. My resolve hardened. Cover every reflective surface. I draped sheets over the mirror, the few glazed pictures, even the dormant television screen. Rummaging through drawers yielded a cracked hand mirror, which I buried face down in a box. Without reflections, perhaps it would lack sanctuary. For several minutes, a fragile sense of security settled. I navigated the room cautiously, keeping my back to the walls, ears straining for the slightest disturbance. The silence was profound, absolute. Then, peripherally, I glimpsed it again. Faint, yet undeniable. Traversing the ceiling now, inverted and distorted, like a projection cast by some low, unseen fire. It stretched into impossible geometries, forming serrated symbols that twisted my insides. I hoisted the torch, aiming upward. The beam struck the plaster, and for a fleeting second, I perceived minuscule scratch marks, shallow gouges marring the paint, as if something had inscribed lines there in my moments of inattention. My heart gave a painful lurch. It was etching its presence into the very fabric of the house. My chest constricted. I shouted again, voice fracturing. Still no reply, only a protracted susurrant sound as the shape withdrew, leaving behind faint grooves my fingertips could trace, glyphs spelling out an indecipherable dread. Departure was no longer a choice, but a necessity. Snatching my jacket, I stumbled towards the front door, nearly upsetting a leaning tower of old newsprint. Outside, the air bit, cold and clean. I inhaled deeply, striving to quell the tremor in my legs. The street lay deserted, save for the distant drone of traffic and the papery rustle of unseen leaves. For an instant, I contemplated abandoning everything. But the papers, the mirror, the house, the burden was mine now. Fear of unleashing this upon another stayed my flight. I waited under the indifferent street lamp until my breathing steadied, then forced myself back across the threshold. Indoors, the lantern had expired. I rekindled the flame with unsteady hands. The shadow was not immediately apparent. I paced slowly, muttering imprecations beneath my breath. The walls appeared ordinary, save for those faint incisions near the ceiling. By the time dawn's gray light began to infiltrate, I felt hollowed out, feverish. My heart still pounded, every muscle screaming with fatigue. It is morning once more. Sleep has remained elusive. The shrouded mirror leans in its corner, mute yet freighted with significance. I possess no strategy for exorcising this presence. It has inflicted no physical wound, offered no tangible contact, yet I feel it leaching something vital, the simple solace of being unaccompanied within my own skin. I perceive subtle motions when vigilance momentarily lapses, a corner of shade bending along a baseboard, a flicker in the glassy reflection of a window pane. I am leaving today, packing my few belongings, but I harbor the chilling suspicion that it might simply migrate with me. Even now, glancing at my phone's dark screen to verify the hour, I catch a peripheral distortion shifting behind my reflection, folding itself into aberrant geometries. The pressure of eyes that are not eyes lingers on my back. A profound coldness settles deep in my bones whenever I turn from any polished surface. I don't comprehend its desires, or the reason it haunts this specific house. I know only that it persists. The marks scored into the walls endure. The memory of its silent, watching presence will be my unwanted baggage. And the next time I glimpse my reflection in some arbitrary shop window, I will scrutinize the edges for that flicker of darkness, undulating patiently, waiting for me to look away. The initial tremor of wrongness arrived via the satellite navigation, its voice a sliver of programmed cheer cutting through the car's quiet hum. In 500 feet, bear right onto Whisper Creek Path. Through the windscreen, washed by the high beams, sprawled only an unbroken expanse of primordial forest, crowding the edges of the asphalt ribbon I traversed. No Whisper Creek path beckoned, no turn existed, nothing but sentinel trees and the profound dark swallowed by my lights. Hours I'd been piloting this machine, threading my way back from some corporate summit in a city whose name already blurred. The conference, a success. My yearning for the familiar embrace of my own sheets, acute. An eagerness, it turned out, that had fostered a perilous faith in the digital oracle, accepting its promise of an expedited route without a flicker of doubt. Now, marooned on this serpentine track, swallowed by wilderness, that faith felt like folly, curdling into fear. I eased off the accelerator, the car gliding, my gaze probing the impenetrable verge. The GPS pinged again, a persistent nudge toward the phantom lane. A sigh escaped me, misting the cool air. Gravel crunched a harsh protest as I pulled onto the narrow shoulder. Recalculating, the device chirped, its synthetic tone oblivious, almost mocking my predicament. My hand instinctively sought my phone, a lifeline to alternative maps. The screen flared to life, illuminating my sinking heart. A void where signal bars should be. Perfect. Just utterly perfect. A deliberate inhalation, an attempt to quell the burgeoning panic. This was manageable. Reverse course, retrace the miles, regain the artery of the main highway. Simple. As the transmission shifted, the sweep of my headlights painted the undergrowth, and for a vertiginous instant, motion flickered, a disturbance in the dense weave of shadow and leaf. I froze, foot suspended above the pedal. Silence returned, only the sighing breeze through the branches. "Steady on, Elias," I muttered, shaking the unease away like water. I backed the car, wrestled it through a clumsy three-point turn, and pointed the nose back the way I presumed I'd come. Presumed. Minutes bled into longer minutes, yet the landscape refused recognition. The road coiled with a viciousness I didn't recall. The trees looming, a claustrophobic canopy overhead. My digital guide had fallen mute, its screen a vacant slate, wiped clean of roads, of orientation, of this place itself. A reboot proved futile. This forest, this path, seemed deliberately omitted from its electronic atlas. 1 hour dissolved into another. Surely the highway should have materialized by now. Instead, only this relentless winding passage remained. The needle on the fuel gauge dipped with alarming swiftness. Exhaustion began to fray the edges of my perception. Then, light bloomed in the rearview mirror. A surge of relief, potent and brief. Company, another soul adrift in this arboreal labyrinth, perhaps one who knew the way. But as the twin points of light swelled, the relief soured. Something felt intrinsically wrong about them. Too faint, their spacing subtly unnatural. Not the familiar gaze of headlamps. My foot pressed down, urging the car forward, but the lights behind mirrored my acceleration flawlessly. Faster, slower, it made no difference. They maintained their precise distance, spectral outriders pacing me through the gloom. Sweat slicked my palms, my knuckles bleached against the steering wheel. Reason scrabbled for purchase. Perhaps another lost traveler, latching onto my taillights for guidance. A flimsy hope, shredded by a deeper, colder certainty. The road ahead contorted sharply. As I navigated the bend, my breath hitched, heart seizing in my chest. There, poised directly in my path, a silhouette. Brakes screamed, tires bit asphalt. the car slewing to a halt mere inches from the obstruction. A woman. Stock still, she stood, swathed in a white dress that seemed to possess its own luminescence against the glare of my headlights, her face veiled by a cascade of long, dark hair. I sat pinned, breath shallow, ragged. The figure remained utterly motionless, seemingly devoid of respiration. Behind me, those aberrant lights crept closer, relentless. My hand, trembling, fumbled for the door handle. An irrational impulse. To offer aid? To plead for it? As my fingers brushed the cold metal, she stirred. Her head snapped upright. The curtain of hair fell away. I cried out, a choked, involuntary sound. Where eyes should have resided, there were only twin voids of absolute night. Her mouth stretched, opening in a silent, impossible scream, revealing not human teeth, but rows of needle-sharp points. Reverse. I slammed the gear stick, desperation overriding all else. Anything to escape the horror framed in my windshield. The thing. The accelerator met the floor. Nothing. A cough, a shudder, then silence from beneath the hood. The engine was dead. The woman, if the term still applied, took a hesitant step towards my vehicle. Another. Her gait was disjointed, puppet-like, movements unnerving in their stilted wrongness. Again, the ignition. Futile. Again, dead. And all the while, her deliberate, jerky advance continued. Behind, the lights were almost upon me. My phone clutched in a death grip. Still no signal. But the screen, something was wrong. The digital clock spun uncontrollably, numbers blurring past comprehension, time itself unraveling. And there, caught in the dark reflection of the glass, the truth froze my blood. The lights trailing me weren't lamps. They were eyes, scores of them, phosphorescent, disembodied, floating in the encroaching darkness. She reached my window, that lipless mouth stretched into a rictus grin. A hand lifted, nails impossibly long, impossibly sharp. A tap against the glass. Tap. A hairline fracture bloomed. Tap. The crack spider-webbed outwards. Tap. The pain groaned, threatening to yield. Eyes squeezed shut, mind racing, grasping for sanctuary. A nightmare. It had to be. Exhaustion's phantasm, conjured behind the wheel. Wake up. Just wake up. I dug my fingernails into my own flesh, a sharp, grounding pain. Wake up, I whispered, a desperate mantra. Wake up, wake up, wake up. The tapping ceased. Slowly, fearfully, I dared to open my eyes. Headlights streamed past, the familiar rumble of traffic. I was parked on the shoulder of a bustling highway, the world blessedly, mundanely normal. My GPS glowed reassuringly, pinpointing my location with crisp precision. Had it all dissolved? A hallucination born of weariness and isolation? As the frantic hammering in my chest began to subside, my gaze fell upon the passenger seat. Something lay there. Something that hadn't been there before. A single strand of hair, impossibly long, raven black. The woman's hair. My blood iced over. With fingers that shook violently, I picked it up, half convinced it would writhe or vanish. It remained stubbornly real, a tangible sliver of the impossible. I dropped it as if burned, the key turning in the ignition with trembling hands. Merging back into the flow of traffic, I couldn't shed the chilling conviction of having narrowly escaped something vast and predatory. Something unfinished. Weeks crawled by under a pall of hypervigilance. Night driving became an ordeal. Maps were scrutinized with paranoid intensity. GPS suggestions for faster routes were dismissed with visceral recoil. Gradually, though, the sharp edges of the memory dulled. The terror receded, morphing into a chilling anecdote, a story trotted out to elicit shivers. The hair? My own, surely, I rationalized, despite the discrepancy in length and shade. Life smoothed over the rupture. Until months later. Driving late, the familiar chime of the navigation system broke the silence. That same synthesized voice, dripping with false cheer, announced, "In 500 feet, bear right onto Whisper Brook Lane." My heart slammed against my ribs. I looked right. There it was, a road unseen before this moment, a narrow, shadowed track plunging into dense woods. And posted at its moor, almost lost in the gloom, stood a solitary figure clad in white. I accelerated past, hands locked on the wheel, refusing to slow, refusing to look too closely. But in the rearview mirror, just before the turnoff vanished, I could have sworn I saw them. Two dim, unnervingly spaced lights detaching themselves from the darkness, beginning to follow. What transpired that night on that impossible road remains shrouded, a terrifying ambiguity I cannot pierce. Real? Hallucinated? Shared delirium? I hold no answers. Only this certainty. My faith in digital guides is shattered. Some shortcuts lead not to expediency, but to places best left undiscovered. Some roads less traveled are less traveled for the most terrifying of reasons. The iron gate groaned, a rusty complaint tearing through the night's profound hush. I lingered, one foot swallowed by the overgrown path snaking towards Blackwood Sanatorium. Before us, the structure clawed at the sky, a derelict silhouette whose shattered windows were vacant sockets, staring with cold accusation. A profound wrongness settled in my gut, yet the siren call of the unknown, amplified by my companion's urging, pulled me onward. "Elias, move. Don't lose your nerve now." Cora's voice sliced the stillness, her flashlight's beam jittering like a captured nerve across the decaying facade. Drawing a breath thick with apprehension, I crossed the threshold onto the grounds. The gate slammed behind me, a metallic finality that vibrated up my spine. We were four: Cora, our self-proclaimed expedition leader; Reese, her steadfast, skeptical shadow; Ren, our documentarian with an artist's eye for decay; and myself, Elias, the cautious counterpoint they perpetually ignored. Weeks this venture had fermented, ever since Cora unearthed some yellowed article detailing the sanatorium's shadowed chronicle. Born in the iron and steam of the 19th century, shuttered abruptly in the 70s, amidst whispers of inmate torment and experiments that defied ethics, Blackwood had festered into morbid local folklore. Phantoms of ghost hunters and adrenaline junkies had brushed against its walls, only to be repelled by structural instability or the mundane threat of patrol cars. But this night felt porous, vulnerable. A swollen moon bled just enough luminescence for navigation, and Cora's cousin, a whisper in the constabulary, hinted at diverted patrols. It was an alignment, a beckoning. Approaching the main entrance, the sheer tonnage of history felt physical, pressing down. Crude sprays of graffiti plastered the lower walls, vibrant scars failing to obscure the institution's grim legacy. Ren raised her camera, the flash spitting brief, stark illumination onto the skeletal porch. "All right, focus," Cora hissed, her voice taut with a near-feverish energy. We stayed tethered, Minimal contact with anything. Anyone falters, we all retreat. Understood? Nods rippled through our small group, though Reese offered a subtle eye roll. His disbelief in spectral encounters was palpable, yet his loyalty to Cora tethered him here. Heavy chains secured the front doors, a futile gesture against time and intent. Reese produced bolt cutters, and with a concise snap, the links parted, falling with a clang that seemed to travel infinitely through the nocturnal silence. Cora shoved the doors inward. A wave of air, stale and thick with the scent of trapped time and mildew, washed over us. To step inside was to penetrate a membrane between worlds. Our flashlight beams carved through the gloom, revealing a reception hall preserved in dust. Chairs, spectral under shrouds of neglect, lined the perimeter. An archaic reception desk stood sentinel, its surface a collage of desiccated papers and the skeletal remains of long-dead flora. "Astounding," Wren murmured, the rapid clicks of her shutter punctuating the silence, as if they simply evaporated. We pushed deeper, our footfalls swallowed by the vastness, echoing strangely off walls shedding paint like sunburnt skin. My light snagged on something gouged into the plaster. 2 words, scratched with frantic finality. "Save me." I swallowed against a sudden constriction in my throat, the ambient chill deepening into something personal. The further we ventured, the more palpable the oppression became. The air acquired weight, thick with motes of decay. We drifted past former treatment rooms, instruments within them rusted into shapes both menacing and pitiable in the fragmented light. An overturned gurney sprawled mid-corridor, startling us collectively, its ancient wheels emitting a faint groan as our passage disturbed decades of absolute stillness. "Look at this," Reese called out, his voice unnervingly amplified in the dead quiet. He stood before a formidable metal door, its face brutally scarred by deep, frantic gouges. Someone was desperate to leave. As we converged, a detail pricked at my awareness. Unlike the pervasive grime coating everything else, this door possessed an odd cleanliness, a lack of accumulated dust. Before the observation could fully form into words, Cora was already shouldering it open. The space beyond was an abyss, consuming our light. Stepping across the threshold, the very quality of the air shifted. Colder, yes, but with an undercurrent, a subtle, impossible draft within the sealed heart of the building. "This feels wrong," I managed, my voice a strained whisper. "Cora, perhaps we should—" The sentence died unborn. With a concussive boom that resonated in our bones, the heavy door slammed shut behind us, extinguishing all light. Wren cried out, a sharp sound followed by the sickening clatter of her camera striking the floor. "What in God's name?" Reese's voice was stretched thin, vibrating with barely contained panic. "Cora, you there? Everyone intact?" My hands trembled violently as I fumbled with my flashlight. When the beam finally sputtered to life, it illuminated not the expected decrepit interior, but a space utterly alien to it. We stood within what appeared to be a laboratory, unnervingly modern, defined by polished stainless steel and the low, resonant hum of unseen machinery. "This cannot be," Cora breathed, her earlier bravado shattered, leaving only raw disbelief. "Where are we?" No answer came. Instead, a door at the chamber's far end slid open with a pneumatic hiss. A figure emerged, silhouetted against an unseen light source. Its form was fundamentally wrong. Elongated, limbs jointed at unnatural angles, impossibly tall. "Welcome," it intoned, the voice a synthesized metallic rasp that scraped along my nerves. "Your arrival was anticipated." Primal fear ignited. We spun, desperate for the exit, only to find the heavy metal door replaced by an expanse of smooth, seamless wall. There was no escape. We were caged. What ensued was a disorienting nightmare woven from strobing lights, shrieking alarms, and the omnipresent, chilling scrutiny of our inhuman captors. They moved us through endless sterile corridors, isolating us, subjecting us to procedures and examinations my mind still refuses to fully catalog. Time dissolved. It might have been hours. It could have been days. Eventually, inexplicably, I found myself returned to that initial laboratory, reunited with the others. But we were altered, changed in ways both subtle and seismic. In the low light, Ren's eyes held a faint, residual luminescence. Reese's skin possessed a strange, almost metallic luster. Cora was present, yet fundamentally absent, a hollowed version of herself. The figure reappeared, observing us. Its blank face somehow radiated a clinical amusement. "The parameters are met. The experiment concludes," it rasped. "You are free to depart." And just like that, abruptly, impossibly, we stood outside again, facing the derelict sanatorium under the indifferent moon, as if the intervening period had been nothing but a shared hallucination. But the building itself betrayed the truth. Its windows now pulsed with a soft, unearthly glow, and a low, mechanical thrum emanated from its depths. We stumbled away, each insulated by shock, struggling to reconcile the irreconcilable. Reaching the groaning gate, I risked a final glance back. The sanatorium seemed to waver, its solid lines momentarily blurring. For a heartbeat, I perceived its true form, not a decaying relic of human misery, but a sophisticated illusion, a shell concealing something vastly more advanced, utterly alien. We never truly spoke of that night. The words didn't exist. Who would lend credence to such a tale? Yet sometimes, catching the faint, strange light in Ren's gaze, or noticing the way light catches unnaturally on Reese's skin, the reality of it crashes back. And late, in the deepest quiet of moon-drenched nights, I sometimes fancy I hear it, that grating, metallic voice. A phantom summons back to Blackwood, back to the place where reality fractured, and where, I suspect, fragments of us remain tethered. Did we unearth some deeply buried terrestrial secret? Or did we blunder into a cosmic theater never meant for human eyes? I cannot say. All I know with certainty is that should the allure of exploring ruins ever beckon again, my path will lie in the opposite direction. Some unknowns are best left undisturbed. Some thresholds are meant to remain uncrossed. Yet, even as I embrace this caution, a chilling conviction persists. Our ordeal at Blackwood was not an isolated incident, merely an overture. Somewhere, in other forgotten structures, in the neglected corners of the world, similar processes may be unfolding. And I wonder, with a sickening blend of dread and morbid fascination, what happens when the entities behind it all decide the time for concealment is over. For now, I attempt normalcy, head down, wary. But a part of me remains perpetually vigilant, scanning the periphery for signs that the world's familiar fabric is fraying. Because once you have glimpsed behind the curtain, retreat into blissful ignorance is impossible. And the most terrifying realization isn't what we discovered within that sanatorium. It's the certainty that it, or things like it, are still out there, patiently waiting.